The gavel slammed down with a finality that echoed through the courtroom, but it was the sharp intake of breath from the woman sitting at the defense table that cut through the tension like a knife. Her fingers gripped the edge of the table so tightly that her knuckles had turned white, while across the room, the board members of Hamilton and Associates exchanged uneasy glances. They had thought this day would never come. 26 years of carefully constructed power dynamics were now unraveling before their eyes. At 52, Sarah Mitchell had become an institution within the company herself. She'd started as an eager 26-year-old administrative assistant, fresh out of community college, with dreams of climbing the corporate ladder. For over 2 decades, she'd watched others receive promotions while she remained in the background, maintaining the machine that kept the company running smoothly. Her loyalty had been unwavering, even when her male counterparts advanced past her, even when younger employees received better offices and more recognition for work she'd helped create. The promotion to Vice President of Operations had come unexpectedly last year, after the previous VP's sudden departure. The board had likely thought they were doing her a favor, finally acknowledging her dedication. But Sarah soon discovered that her new title came with a staggering 50% pay cut compared to her predecessor's salary. When she questioned it, HR had cited budget constraints and market adjustments, though she knew full well that several junior executives earned significantly more than her new compensation package. What no one had anticipated was how this apparent slap in the face would transform Sarah Mitchell from a quiet, reliable worker into someone entirely different. The change had been subtle at first, small acts of defiance, meticulously documented discrepancies, and carefully cultivated alliances with other overlooked employees. But as months passed, her actions grew bolder, more calculated, until she found herself staring down the very people who had spent years dismissing her value. The lawsuit she'd filed wasn't just about the pay cut anymore. It had evolved into something far greater, exposing years of systematic discrimination, questionable business practices, and a culture of entitlement that permeated every level of Hamilton and Associates. As Sarah sat there in the courtroom, listening to the opening statements, she couldn't help but notice how nervous the usually confident executives appeared. They should be, she thought. After 26 years of playing by their rules, she'd finally learned how to change them. The memory of that fateful Monday morning still burned vividly in Sarah's mind. The way sunlight had streamed through her kitchen window as she read the official promotion letter, the coffee cup trembling slightly in her hands. Her husband, Mark, had been preparing breakfast, humming softly as he flipped pancakes. "This is it," she'd whispered, not quite believing the words herself. 26 years of early mornings, late nights, weekends spent answering emails, and countless moments when she'd chosen work over personal time, all culminating in this single piece of paper. But the initial euphoria had quickly soured during her first meeting with the finance department. Susan, the perpetually cheerful payroll manager, had tried to break the news gently. "Well, Sarah, we've adjusted your compensation package to reflect current market standards." The numbers on the spreadsheet told a different story. Her new salary was barely enough to cover her mortgage and basic expenses. When she'd asked for clarification, Susan had shifted uncomfortably, explaining that the company needed to right-size executive compensation. That evening, sitting at the same kitchen table where she'd celebrated hours earlier, Sarah had pored over old pay stubs and company reports. The pattern emerged clearly. For every promotion she'd missed, another man had received not just the title but also the accompanying raise. Each rejection had been delivered with variations of the same excuses: "You're too valuable where you are," or "We need your institutional knowledge in operations." Now, finally offered the position she'd worked toward her entire career, they were paying her less than half of what her male predecessors had earned. The breaking point came 3 months later during the quarterly review meeting. As she presented her department's achievements, she noticed the subtle eye rolls and dismissive gestures from her fellow executives, men who had once sought her advice but now treated her contributions as trivial. Their body language spoke volumes. Despite her title, she was still just the girl from admin in their eyes. That night, instead of going home, Sarah stayed late in her office, methodically going through years of company records, documenting every instance of inequality, every hollow promise, every moment of being overlooked. By dawn, she had compiled a comprehensive dossier that would become her weapon. Her first act of rebellion started small but carried significant weight. During the annual performance reviews, she implemented a new evaluation system that required managers to provide concrete metrics for salary decisions. When the usual excuses began, market conditions, experience levels, company needs, she countered with data showing consistent patterns of gender-based discrepancies. The resistance from upper management was immediate and fierce. but Sarah stood firm, citing company policy and legal requirements. For the first time in her career, she watched her colleagues squirm under scrutiny they'd never expected from her. The real transformation began when she discovered the company's offshore accounts while reviewing international operations. At first, she thought it was a simple tax optimization strategy, but deeper investigation revealed something more sinister: systematic profit shifting that artificially depressed reported earnings, conveniently justifying their claims of budget constraints. Armed with this information, Sarah began strategically leaking details to trusted contacts in the media and regulatory agencies, careful to maintain plausible deniability while ensuring the information reached the right ears. Her most brilliant move came when she identified key allies among the younger generation of employees, ambitious millennials frustrated with the company's outdated practices. Through casual conversations and carefully timed mentorship sessions, she built a network of supporters who began questioning established protocols and demanding transparency. These young professionals, armed with social media savvy and a natural distrust of corporate rhetoric, became her eyes and ears throughout the organization, feeding her information while simultaneously creating internal pressure for change. The turning point arrived when Sarah discovered the company's illegal dumping practices in overseas manufacturing facilities. While environmental regulations had been tightening globally, Hamilton and Associates had maintained a dangerous double standard, cutting costs by violating waste disposal laws in countries with weaker enforcement mechanisms. This revelation provided her with the leverage she needed to begin dismantling the company's carefully constructed facade. She started by anonymously submitting evidence to environmental watchdog groups, knowing their investigations would trigger regulatory scrutiny that the company couldn't easily dismiss. As she orchestrated these moves, Sarah developed a new persona within the company, still polite and professional, but with an edge of steel that made even senior executives hesitate before challenging her. Her meetings became masterclasses in strategic maneuvering. She would present seemingly innocuous proposals that, upon closer examination, forced the company to either admit wrongdoing or expose their hypocrisy. The board members, accustomed to her former compliance, struggled to adjust to this new reality where every decision carried potential consequences beyond their control. The complexity of her situation manifested in unexpected ways. One evening, while scrolling through old family photos, Sarah paused at an image of her daughter's 5th birthday party. Emma had wanted to visit the zoo, but Sarah had been stuck in the office dealing with an emergency project. She remembered the disappointment in her daughter's eyes when they'd settled for a quick dinner instead. The pain of those missed moments hit her anew, compounded by the realization that she'd sacrificed precious years of her life for an organization that valued her only as long as she remained invisible and compliant. Her relationship with Mark had evolved into something resembling a delicate dance. He supported her cause completely, yet she could see the worry etched into his features each time she mentioned work. Their conversations often revolved around practical matters, legal fees, financial planning, contingency strategies, but beneath the surface lay unspoken fears about what might happen if her campaign failed. During particularly stressful periods, she would wake up in the middle of the night to find him watching her sleep, his protective gaze both comforting and heartbreaking. At work, the atmosphere had become electric with tension. Younger employees approached her with a mixture of admiration and apprehension, seeking guidance while wondering if her actions might cost them their jobs. Some of her oldest colleagues avoided eye contact in the hallways, their faces masks of guilt and fear. The executive team's behavior oscillated between aggressive attempts to undermine her authority and desperate efforts to appease her demands. In meetings, she noticed how their voices faltered when addressing her, how their usual bravado crumbled under her steady gaze. The psychological toll manifested in subtle ways. She found herself analyzing every interaction for hidden motives, questioning even the most innocent conversations. Sleep became elusive, her mind constantly racing through scenarios and countermoves. Yet, amidst this turmoil, a strange clarity emerged. For the first time in her career, she felt truly alive, each challenge sharpening her focus and strengthening her resolve. The person she saw in the mirror bore little resemblance to the woman who had once accepted every slight without complaint. During one particularly tense board meeting, Sarah watched as Richard Thompson, the CEO, attempted to defend the company's environmental record. His voice cracked slightly as he explained away the damning evidence she'd leaked to regulators. Across the table, Margaret Chun, the CFO, kept nervously adjusting her glasses while trying to redirect the conversation to more favorable topics. These small signs of weakness confirmed what Sarah had suspected: they were starting to crack under the pressure. Her strategy had created a perfect storm of crises for Hamilton and Associates. The environmental violations had triggered multiple investigations, forcing the company to divert resources to damage control. Meanwhile, the documentation she'd provided to labor authorities about wage disparities had sparked a class action lawsuit from current and former employees. The media coverage had been relentless, with each new revelation generating more negative publicity. Investors, already spooked by the offshore account revelations, were beginning to pull out, sending stock prices tumbling. Inside the company, the atmosphere had become toxic. Middle management scrambled to cover tracks while trying to maintain operations. Departments that had functioned smoothly for years now operated in silos, each protecting their own interests. The younger employees Sarah had mentored had begun organizing formally, creating support networks that challenged traditional power structures. Even the usually loyal administrative staff had started questioning orders, their faith in leadership shaken by the cascade of scandals. What pleased Sarah most was how her actions had forced the board to turn on each other. Long-standing alliances fractured as each member tried to distance themselves from responsibility. Old rivalries resurfaced, making rational decision-making nearly impossible. The company's once pristine reputation was tarnished beyond repair, and every attempt to spin the narrative only seemed to dig them deeper into trouble. As she observed the chaos unfolding around her, Sarah realized she had succeeded in making them lose everything: trust, credibility, financial stability, and most importantly, control. Yet amid the destruction, something remarkable was emerging. Young professionals who had witnessed the company's downfall were speaking openly about changing corporate culture. Industry leaders were forced to address systemic issues they'd long ignored. Regulatory bodies were implementing stricter oversight measures. The very foundations of how business was conducted were shifting, and Sarah found herself at the center of this transformation, wielding influence far beyond what her original position had ever allowed. In the weeks following the initial court proceedings, Sarah found herself navigating a complex emotional landscape. Each victory against Hamilton and Associates brought a mix of satisfaction and sorrow, satisfaction at finally being heard, and sorrow at the years wasted waiting for recognition. Her days became a blur of legal consultations, media interviews, and strategic planning sessions with her growing network of allies. The stress manifested physically. She lost weight, developed insomnia, and experienced frequent headaches, yet she pressed on with unwavering determination. Her relationship with her family evolved in unexpected ways. Emma, now in her 20s, had initially struggled to understand why her mother was risking everything after so many years of silence. But as the truth about Hamilton and Associates emerged, her daughter became one of Sarah's strongest supporters, helping to organize grassroots campaigns and manage social media outreach. Mark took on additional responsibilities at home, ensuring Sarah could focus on her mission while maintaining some semblance of normalcy in their lives. Their evenings often consisted of tactical discussions about next steps, interspersed with moments of quiet reflection about the life they'd built together. Workplace dynamics transformed dramatically. Younger employees who had once feared approaching her now sought her counsel regularly. Many confessed they had doubted her ability to challenge the status quo, but witnessing her transformation inspired them to speak up about their own experiences with discrimination and unfair treatment. The administrative staff, once invisible cogs in the corporate machine, began forming their own support networks, sharing information and strategies for advancement. Even some mid-level managers, recognizing the writing on the wall, started aligning themselves with Sarah's cause, bringing valuable insider knowledge to her operation. The board's desperation became increasingly apparent. They attempted to offer settlements, promising substantial compensation and public apologies, but Sarah refused each proposal. She understood that money alone couldn't rectify decades of institutionalized injustice. Instead, she pushed forward with her legal case while simultaneously working to implement lasting changes within the industry. Her actions had created a domino effect, with other companies facing similar scrutiny and employees finding courage to demand better treatment. As the lawsuit progressed, Sarah found herself reflecting on the nature of power and justice. The experience had taught her that true strength didn't lie in holding a high-ranking position or commanding respect through authority. It came from understanding one's worth, having the courage to stand up for it, and using whatever influence available to create meaningful change. Every sleepless night, every moment of doubt, every sacrifice had led her to this point, not just fighting for herself, but for everyone who had ever been told they weren't good enough, weren't valuable enough, weren't worthy of fair treatment. The media attention surrounding her case reached fever pitch. Major news outlets ran feature stories about her journey, transforming her from a corporate whistleblower into a symbol of workplace justice. Talk show hosts invited her to share her experiences, and industry conferences begged her to speak about systemic change. Yet through it all, Sarah remained focused on her primary goal, dismantling the corrupt system that had controlled her life for 26 years. She knew the fight was far from over, that the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, but for the first time, she faced the future with hope rather than resignation. The legal proceedings entered a critical phase, with deposition schedules filling Sarah's calendar and expert witnesses being called to testify. Each day brought new revelations about Hamilton and Associates' practices, painting an increasingly damning picture of corporate misconduct. The company's lawyers adopted increasingly aggressive tactics, attempting to discredit her testimony and challenge the authenticity of her evidence. During one particularly heated cross-examination, opposing counsel suggested her actions stemmed from personal vendettas rather than genuine concern for workplace equality. Sarah responded with calm precision, presenting years of documented evidence that silenced the courtroom. Meanwhile, the ripple effects of her campaign continued spreading throughout the industry. Other major corporations began conducting internal audits, fearful of similar exposure. Professional organizations hosted emergency panels discussing diversity and inclusion, while regulatory bodies proposed sweeping reforms to prevent such systemic abuses. Former colleagues from Hamilton and Associates started reaching out, some offering apologies for past behavior, others seeking advice on how to implement change within their new organizations. Sarah's network of allies expanded beyond anything she could have imagined. Environmental activists joined forces with labor rights advocates, creating a powerful coalition that amplified her message. Tech-savvy supporters developed analytical tools to track corporate accountability, while legal experts volunteered their services to assist others in similar situations. The movement had taken on a life of its own, transcending individual grievances to address fundamental issues of corporate governance and social responsibility. Yet with each new development came increased personal risk. Anonymous threats arrived regularly, forcing her to install security systems at home and vary her daily routines. The strain showed in her relationships. Emma worried constantly about her safety, while Mark wrestled with his protective instincts versus respecting her autonomy. During rare quiet moments, Sarah found herself questioning whether she truly considered all the consequences when she embarked on this path. The answer always came back the same: no price was too high for justice, no sacrifice too great for change. As the trial approached its climax, Sarah stood before the packed courtroom, her presence commanding attention without any need for dramatic gestures. The transformation from the woman who had once blended into corporate backgrounds to this formidable figure at the center of a national reckoning was complete. Her testimony wove together decades of personal experience with irrefutable evidence of systemic wrongdoing, painting a comprehensive picture of institutional betrayal. The board members, once untouchable in their positions of power, now shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their carefully constructed defenses crumbling under the weight of truth. The media circus surrounding the case had reached unprecedented levels, with news helicopters circling the courthouse and reporters camped outside her home. Yet Sarah moved through this chaos with a grace born of purpose, her every action calculated to maintain momentum while protecting her allies. The coalition she had built operated like a well-oiled machine, each member playing their part in exposing new layers of corruption while supporting those affected by the fallout. Environmental groups released coordinated reports about industrial pollution, while labor organizations staged demonstrations highlighting wage disparities across multiple industries. Inside Hamilton and Associates, the situation had become untenable. Key executives resigned weekly, unable to weather the storm of revelations. The company's stock had plummeted to historic lows, triggering panic among investors and forcing emergency board meetings almost daily. Yet what troubled Sarah most was watching talented young professionals leave in droves, taking their skills and ideals to organizations that promised better values. The brain drain threatened to cripple the company faster than any legal judgment could. Her personal life reflected the intensity of her public battle. Mark had taken a leave of absence from work to manage their security and handle media inquiries, while Emma had become a vocal advocate for workplace reform, speaking at universities and conferences about growing up in the shadow of corporate injustice. Their family dinners had transformed into strategy sessions, with each member contributing their strengths to the ongoing campaign. Despite the pressure, they found moments of joy in their shared purpose, their bond strengthened by the adversity they faced together. The complexity of her position manifested in unexpected ways. Industry leaders who had once dismissed her now sought private meetings, hoping to learn how to avoid similar crises. Government officials approached her for insights into crafting effective regulation, while academic institutions offered honorary degrees and teaching positions. Through it all, Sarah maintained her focus on the ultimate goal, not just winning her case, but establishing a new standard for corporate accountability and social responsibility that would endure long after the trial concluded. As she prepared for closing arguments, Sarah recognized that her journey had become something far greater than personal vindication. It had evolved into a catalyst for widespread change, inspiring others to question established power structures and demand transparency from their own organizations. The documents she had gathered, the testimony she had secured, and the alliances she had forged represented years of meticulous planning and unwavering commitment. Now, as she stood on the brink of potentially reshaping an entire industry's approach to ethics and equality, Sarah understood that true power lay not in titles or salaries, but in the ability to create lasting, meaningful change that transcended individual circumstances. The jury's verdict came after 5 tense days of deliberation. As the foreperson read the decision, guilty on all counts, a wave of relief washed over Sarah, but it was the judge's order that truly sealed her victory. Hamilton and Associates was fined heavily, forced to implement sweeping reforms, and placed under a decade of federal oversight. The board members sat stunned, their empire crumbling around them. That evening, Sarah stood on her porch with Mark and Emma by her side, watching the sunset. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages from supporters, colleagues, and even strangers thanking her for what she'd done. But as she looked at her family, she felt something deeper than triumph, peace. "I didn't just win this for me," she said softly, smiling at the horizon. "I won it for everyone who ever thought they couldn't fight back." And in that moment Sarah knew, justice wasn't just about losing or winning, it was about changing the rules so no one else had to play the same rigged game again.